If you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions on a daily basis in your practice, where you feel like the days are just going by, where you have no control over what's going on, which typically turns into you not enjoying what you're doing on your patients. And that ultimately impacts your income, which may be inconsistent from month to month. Well, I've been there, and there are still a few days out of the year where I feel the same. And in this video, that's exactly what I want to share with you, is the things I've done, the routines that I have in my office that has given me the control back. So make sure to stick around through the video, because I'm going to get into the exact routines I follow in my practice that's giving me the control back for my day and ultimately my finances. So as I was saying before, there are days where you may feel like this every day, because I know I used to, where you feel like you're just going through the fast lane on the highway and you're just running into things as they come along. And at the end of the day, you're just feeling exhausted and glad that your day's over, until the next day you have to do it all over again. So now it's a new day. You wake up, you make tea, coffee, whatever your morning routine is. Maybe you get to exercise if you've got the time. You rush, you get ready, you get to the office, and you've got all these patients lined up. But you realize there's a patient on the schedule and the lab hasn't returned their case because someone forgot to follow up. Maybe there's team issues. Maybe someone's called out, and now you're short-staffed. There's a patient on the schedule who has a balance on their account from like 4 months ago because the insurance paid less than what you expected. And now you've seen all your patients, it's the end of day, and you are just exhausted. But you realize there's still one more thing left. You've got to sit down with your office manager or maybe your front desk personnel and go over all the exciting things like your production, collection, which 2 patients canceled today, why the 2 patients canceled on you today and why they no-showed, why you're not scheduled to your goals for the next week and the following week when you've got a list of patients who have pending treatment, and why you have holes in the schedule tomorrow. Maybe you're not scheduled to your goal for the next 2 weeks, especially when you have a list of patients with unscheduled treatment, etc. But you just want to head home because it's the end of day. It feels like it's never ending. You're constantly putting out fires. It literally feels like you're showing up to the office to put some cash in the bank so you can pay the bills for the month. And hopefully, if you've got some left over, you pay yourself. I felt like this for a long time until I decided to take control and slow down. Don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I still have chaotic days. There are days where I have to deal with things as they come along, but it is nowhere close to what it was like the first 5 years after starting my practice back in 2013. If you read my newsletter, watched my previous videos, read through my blog posts, you know that I talk about routines quite a bit. But because of the routines and most importantly the consistency, I've been able to cut back my clinical days to only 2 days a week in the practice with no associates and no hygienists. I do procedures that I like. I still take PPO insurances. I'm not a full fee-for-service practice. I take home a pay that I'm happy with because it allows me to pay my personal bills, which isn't a lot compared to what I bring home, because I have no personal debt. It allows me to reinvest the cash flow back into the office. And the time that I'm not spending at the office, I can spend that time going after my hobbies, building things that I want to build, like my software company. The monthly cash flow also allows me to consistently invest into my retirement accounts, the active trading accounts, crypto, and then also for me to splurge on things that I want to buy, like gadgets or traveling with family, etc. I can do a whole separate video on personal routine stuff, which is non-office related, because over the years, I've used a lot of different things like manual, just writing things down on a piece of paper, to using different apps, to-do lists, different software products online. It's been a constant struggle where you write a bunch of things down, you don't get done what you plan to do, and then at the end of the day, you feel like crap. It's been a constant struggle, but I've gotten better over time. You'll reach a certain point in your life where you follow routines without having to even think about it. Some you're already doing because it's become so ingrained into your daily habits, like brushing your teeth. For me, I wake up, brush my teeth, I drink a warm lemon water with some turmeric, black pepper, and some salt. Over time, I've added and removed things from the routine depending on what's going on in my life. Like for example, I used to wake up at 6 a.m., go to the gym, work out. Now, however, now that I have a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, the workout happens in the afternoon when they're napping. Following a pattern of routines is super boring, but because I've been doing it for so long, I do it without even thinking about it. In the beginning, when I started, it was tough, but as I started to see results, I kept going. Now I rarely get sick. I can run faster. I can lift heavier than I did in my 20s. I can honestly tell you that routines in my personal life have allowed me to fight many personal battles prior to this point. These good routines and habits have also spilled over into business, which is my practice. It's an amazing domino effect. For instance, when you work out consistently, you become conscious of what you're eating, which means now you're eating less crap, so you become leaner. This phenomenon, it actually is referred to as habit stacking, which is what James Clear, the famous author, talks about in his book, The Atomic Habits. I have not fully finished reading it. Whatever I have read so far, it's an amazing book and I recommend you read it. And in my dental practice, it is no different than it is in my personal life. In the office, you are just doing different activities, but the same habit stacking concept applies. There are routines that I've established with my team for the administrative side as well as the clinical side. And for instance, if we just look at the administrative side, if we do all the things we're supposed to do on a daily basis, you will have less work to do on the weekly and the monthly basis and so on. And the opposite is also true, that if you skip things that are supposed to be done on a daily basis, the work piles up onto weeks and then to month, and then also the errors will also add on to your weekly and monthly basis. To give you an example, if on a daily basis, you don't check for whether or not correct procedures are actually attached to a patient's appointment and that the correct insurance verification information is attached to that patient's chart, when you generate the claims, most likely you're going to get payment that is less than you expect. Another example is if on a daily basis you don't check for rejected claims, which are claims that are kicked back due to, let's say, incorrect information, maybe your team entered the wrong group number into the computer. These claims, there will be our weekly routine of following up on outstanding claims. We'll have more claims to follow up on, increasing the amount of work your team has to do, which could have been eliminated from the get-go. If we do all the work up front that's supposed to be done, your team will spend a lot less time on their weekly and monthly routines, okay? Time that you're paying for. To give you an idea of what our routines look like, I've included a downloadable PDF, which is linked to at the bottom of this video. Now, routines without consistency are completely pointless. I don't have an employee handbook that my team references, and you don't have to get fancy. This could literally be printed up on a piece of paper with large fonts that your team can easily reference and look at it every day. It kind of becomes the office Bible. In order to get the most done for the amount of time that you're spending at the office, systems must be in place for your team so you can make it super easy for them to accomplish whatever it is that you need them to do. So before getting into it, here's a bigger picture of how I like to think of all this. Routines are the activities that your team must complete to reach a certain goal. Which goals these are, I'll get to in a minute. A system is basically a set of processes that explains step by step from start to finish how to complete that activity. And it must be assigned to a team member. And most importantly, the consistency is the preset time and frequency. For example, every Wednesday or daily or a monthly routine. You may go a step further and actually indicate a time called time blocking. For example, outstanding claim follow-up calls need to be made every Wednesday at 1 p.m. You as the doctor or the owner are busy seeing patients, but there must be routines and activities that must take place to accomplish 3 goals. These 3 goals are the most important things that help me move the needle. So the first goal is that your schedule is productive so that your hygienists and or the other associates and other doctors can actually produce. Second goal is collecting what you produce. If you're not collecting what you're producing, you're working for free. You're leaving money on the table. Number 3 is patient retention. Not everyone comes back for a 6-month cleaning. Some patients may only return for emergencies. But in order to sustain your practice and be able to pay the fixed and the variable expenses, you have to bring back a certain percentage of these patients. So that is my version of how I've implemented it in my practice. Any activity or routine that's completed in the office supports either one of these 3 goals. Let's look at an example. Team training. For instance, training my team on how to handle questions and objections from patients regarding making patient payments at time of service. That itself becomes the activity or the routine. The system is basically a process start to finish on how to accomplish this routine. So in this example, it could be maybe a table with the list of questions a patient could possibly ask. The second column would indicate what answer you would want the team to give to the patient. Okay, so it's a written out process on how to accomplish that activity. The other important piece to the system is how accessible is it? Can your team easily access this information? Is it written down on a piece of paper or can they digitally access this information? And then I may decide to spend 1 hour every month on basically training my front desk personnel on how to do this activity. And that becomes the frequency or the preset time or for consistency. But this whole routine or the activity of training my team on how to handle objections and questions when it comes to patient payments is going to help me accomplish one thing, which is collecting what I produce, which is one of the 3 goals that I mentioned earlier. The PDF that you'll be able to download indicates the routine, the schedule, as well as the goal that it will help me accomplish. So let's now look at an example routine that I've listed on the PDF. So the number 1 goal was to have a productive schedule. So the first routine that I want to mention is that on daily and weekly basis, I have my front desk team reach out to patients for pending treatment. Whether it's their first time reaching out to the patient after having something treatment planned for the patient, or their second, third, fourth, or fifth attempt, unless the patient specifically asks you not to follow up with them, we make sure our team reaches out to them. For instance, with Teamio, I'm able to see on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis who is calling which patients and what's happening with each phone call. We're also tracking the history of the follow-up activity on each phone call, as well as who's actually scheduling appointments from these follow-ups. If your team makes one phone call to a patient and the patient doesn't pick up, for example, there's a high chance that they're never called again. And this patient is going to fall through the cracks until the patient comes back for their next recall. So you need an easy system for your team to know who is to be called and when, who's to be followed up with, and who is not to be followed up with. If you do this consistently, you not only keep your data clean and the patient list clean, but you will consistently fill your schedule with always having patients in the pipeline to reach out to for pending work. I've talked to hundreds of team members after doing demos of our software, to team members, training the owners and the office managers. I can tell you that following up with patients for pending treatment creates this sense of being too salesy. But instead of feeling like you're being pushy or salesy, think of it as you're doing service to the patient. It's a mindset shift from thinking, I may annoy this patient for leaving this voicemail for the second time. Think of it as you're doing service to the patient by reminding them that there's pending work that they need to schedule an appointment for to move forward before it turns into something serious. Following up with patients is a topic that I could create a whole separate video on. I won't get into the details here, so let's move forward. So another routine that we have that meets our number 1 goal of having a productive schedule is that we track our scheduled production for the upcoming weeks. I don't care to look at the next month because we all know patient schedule changes from day to day. But what I do care to look at is at least have a productive schedule for the next 2 weeks because we know we can get most of the patients to keep their appointments. So what this does is provides an easy way with a quick glance for my team to look at the schedule and know whether or not we're meeting our scheduled goals. Whatever system you decide to use, whether it's some Excel sheet, you're running queries manually, whatever it may be, just make sure your team has an easy way to look at whether or not you're scheduled to goal. So again, please reference the PDF to go over other routines and activities that are part of meeting goal number 1, which is to have a productive schedule. Because at this point, I'm going to move forward with the second goal, which is to collect what we produce. So one routine or activity that we do is making sure we attach supporting documentation / narrative, okay? In order for this to happen, you need to have some system in place. Since you'll need to communicate with the team member who's going to be sending the narrative and the supporting documentation over to the insurance company, they should be working with pre-made templates and have a way to communicate with the providers in the practice. When I say providers, I mean the hygienists and doctors, etc. If you're in an office that has outsourced insurance claims, you still need a way to communicate with that outsourced company. So you're basically the insurance coordinator within the practice may still need to communicate back and forth with the outsourced company for things they may need to send over for processing of the claim. For instance, if the outsourced company needs a specific narrative from a doctor, or they need to tell somebody in the office, for instance, the insurance coordinator, that they need to call the patient because the patient needs to call the insurance company for processing of the claim, you need a way in whatever form it is, whether it's chat, email, whatever system you use, to track all this communication back and forth and track it back to that claim, okay? For us, it's using Teamio's outstanding claims, follow-ups, and activities, as well as using Teamio tasks, where we can tag a specific team member and get their attention, as well as tag that specific task to a patient, so all the communication is trackable for a specific patient and for a specific claim. Another routine we have in place to make sure we collect what we produce is keep an eye on patient balances. Yes, it's part of AR, and by definition, AR means accounts receivable, which means money owed to you, the practice, by either patients, third-party financing companies, insurance companies, or by patients, okay? So keeping an eye on patient balance becomes super critical even after claims are paid. The easiest way to not have any patient balance is to simply collect at time of service. For a fee-for-service practice, it's super easy. You collect whatever you're going to do at the time of patient visit. If you're doing a multi-visit procedure, let's say for instance a crown, you may collect 75% at time you prep, and then the rest of it you're going to collect on insert. So whatever the patient didn't pay on the day they came in, it simply stays on the patient account. But for an insurance patient, assuming you've verified their benefits and you've correctly attached that information to the patient's chart, the day the patient comes in for the crown prep, for instance, you would collect that patient's full out-of-pocket, and when that claim payment comes in, the amount of the payment on the claim and whatever you collected from the patient that day should equal the in-network fee or the allowable fee for the procedure you billed that day. And also remember, this is all assuming the insurance pays as expected. What if the claim payment came in short? Okay, for instance, what if you didn't take into account the fact that Cigna downgrades your 2740, which is the all ceramic crown, downgrades it to a stainless steel crown, which is a 2790? Yes, that will happen. Now, when the claim payment comes in and whatever you collected that day is going to fall short of the actual procedure you did, which is the all ceramic crown, but the total payment you got in full, which is the claim payment and the patient out of pocket, equals a stainless steel crown. So now the patient is going to have a balance on their account, and you need a way to track that patient balance. The simplest way to avoid all this from happening is to just assume downgrades for everything, your composites and your crowns. But this will mean that the patient will end up having a little bit of credit on their account, and that's okay. I'd rather have credit on the account than a patient balance. Always remember, it's always harder to collect money from the patient after the procedure is completed than to refund the money. In my office, we have a list where we can easily see patient balances after the claim is generated. So we know this is a true patient balance or the money that they owe. And we know that we need to follow up on it. So the next step is simply putting this patient into a follow-up cycle. That may mean following up with the patient with a phone call, sending a statement, sending them a text link where they can pay via text, or after certain attempts of follow-ups, you may decide to send this patient to collections. It doesn't matter, whatever you decide to use to help you track patient balances, you just need a way to know which patients owe money, and you need a way to know which patients have been followed up on and who's following up with them, what's happening with each follow-up, and when they're going to be contacted again. And after enough attempts, you may decide that you need to send them to collections. So you need a way to track all of this information. And all of this has to happen consistently to keep up with patient balances. All right, moving on. There are other routines and activities that need to take place in order to make sure that your collections stay close to production. Number one is attaching correct procedures to the appointment for the patient on schedule, as well as making sure that those correct procedures are actually also on the claim that you generate at the end of the appointment. It's super critical. If, for instance, you're doing a certain number of x-rays during the patient's hygiene visit, you need to make sure the correct codes as well as the exact number of x-rays are attached to that appointment, as well as on the claim if this is an insurance patient. For example, if you're doing multiple periapical x-rays, the first periapical actually goes in as a separate code, and the additional periapical x-rays that you've taken also have a separate code. So it's important to make sure the right number of x-rays along with proper codes are attached to the appointment. As simple as it sounds, the number of times this is looked over is costing you on a daily basis. All right, moving on. Checking the insurance submission portal. Whatever system you use in your practice, I use Dental Exchange in my practice, but checking if any claims are kicked back or rejected due to incorrect information that may have been entered into the computer. This should be done on a daily basis, so you can take the right action to correct the claim before the insurance company even starts to process it. Sometimes the claims are rejected because the patient is not found on their system, and that may be because the patient has either changed insurance, the patients themselves are not aware of it, or they just simply forgot to tell you. All right, I want to get to the third goal, which is a critical piece for a growing practice, which is patient retention. Of course, you need new patients, but if they're only coming back to see you once and the rest are leaving the back door, and you have no way of knowing whether or not this is actually happening, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And to make it worse, if you're spending money on marketing, your cost of acquiring each patient is significantly higher because the lifetime value of each patient is significantly lower because they're not sticking around. And this is why your hygiene or the recall department is super critical. If you have one or more hygienists in your practice, we're all aware that their payroll costs have gone through the roof. So keeping your hygienist productive means having a strong recall program. And having a strong recall program starts with you pre-booking the patients that are already coming in for their recall visits, pre-booking them for their next visit. Okay. In addition, your team needs an easy access to see a list of patients who are actually overdue for recall. So they can either be followed up through a phone call, and they should actually be contacted automatically via text that, hey, you're due for your cleaning visit. Please call our office ASAP to schedule your appointment. And again, if you're, whether it's your phone follow-ups or the auto texting in the background, if all of this is done consistently, you will reduce the holes in your hygiene schedule. You will keep your hygienist productive, and not only hygienists, but you will also keep your doctors as well as the associate doctors busy. All right, so that's pretty much how I run my practice. That's sort of like the bigger picture. And that's what I wanted to share with you guys in this video. Having written down routines is important, but it's actually more important to follow through with them. Whatever system you decide to use, whether it's on a piece of paper, an Excel sheet, or Teamio, you and your team just need a way to see what needs to be done, when it needs to be done by, which means deadline, how often it needs to be done, and also track whether or not it's actually completed. It's important that all of this is done on a consistent basis. You can't just do something for 1 week or 2 weeks or the first month and expect results. And also remember, none of this has to be set in stone. As you grow busier, as you grow your practice, you're going to be constantly tweaking your systems. You just need to make sure that everyone in your office that's involved with the process is on the same page. That's it for today. Hope this was helpful, and keep tuning in.